Welcome to Finance in Flow, where we explore how technology transforms the office of the CFO. My name is Janis Steinmann, I'm the head of XBRL at LucaNet and the host of this episode. Today we're diving into how artificial intelligence is finally meeting structured financial data to create conversational analysis tools that could revolutionize how finance teams work. Joining us from Oxford is John Turner, the CEO of XBRL International, the consortium that provides the free global standard for structured business reporting. John has been leading XBRL International for over 11 years. John, it's really nice to have you. Anything you would like to add?
Hey, thanks very much, Janis. Hey, nice to see you, Phil. I'm really pleased to be with you today and dive into these new ideas. And thanks a lot for the opportunity. I've spent a lot of time in this space. I've watched digital reporting transform from kind of a distant dream to a global reality through a range of different lenses. As a regulator, I kind of lived and breathed the need for bulletproof data from financial institutions. Inside the Big Four, I witnessed seismic shifts from paper to pixels, really. And leading a startup, I got my hands dirty helping regulators and firms to sort of crack this digital code using XBRL. Now, after more than a decade running XBRL International, the numbers tell the story. We've got a couple of hundred regulatory mandates across 70 countries, covers about 25 million companies, including a vast majority of public companies on the planet. And new mandates drop every few months. But now AI has arrived, and that's likely to change absolutely everything. In many respects, digital reporting has kind of been holding its breath for this moment. Some companies have treated digital reporting as a box ticking exercise. It's like a compliance exercise, file, move on. That era just died. From now on, when a company publishes its own single digital version of the truth, AI engines across the world will almost immediately dissect all of those data points and will be looking for synergies. They'll spot opportunities that humans miss. They'll be looking in terms of new capital, in terms of fresh customers, in terms of untapped suppliers. So your structured data becomes a sort of a beacon. It's broadcasting possibilities around the world. And for that reason, it's all of a sudden way more important.
All right. Thank you very much. Also from England, today we have Phil Wilding. He's an AI entrepreneur at HG, which is one of Europe's leading software-focused private equity firms. Phil is a serial entrepreneur with multiple successful exits who is now helping portfolio companies like LucaNet navigate AI adoption. Welcome to the podcast. Is anything about you that our listeners should know?
Thanks for having me, and nice to meet you, John. So, look, I was fortunate enough to be a fintech founder for 16 years. So that was in a regulated industry. That was a company called Vast Visibility, and we did insurance comparison, where we would process quotes and pass them into the market. And, optimizing those workflows was really labor intensive back then. You had to make sure that everything matched and everything was correct to make sure that people's insurance was incepted in the right way. So I now work for HG Capital's value creation team, and they're an awesome team. And what that's actually showing me, it's been amazing to see how you can truly reimagine a whole business and a whole workflow through an AI lens. So, I really wish I was building my tech business now in this age of AI, right? Because I think things that we could only imagine 5 years ago, they're now reality. And that pace of change is pretty extraordinary. So I think conversational financial analysis is definitely one of AI's killer applications, but it's not without some serious challenges. And I guess that's what's going to make today's conversation even more fascinating. So thanks again for having me and looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, me too. So this sounds like we have someone who has spent a decade building the global data infrastructure and someone who's been on the front lines of implementing AI in finance companies. That's going to be interesting. So let's dive right in. Maybe, John, for those out there who don't know what the abbreviation XBRL is about, there's still quite a few of those. Maybe, I know you have done this 1,000 times already, but what is XBRL in, let's say, 2 sentences?
Okay, 2 sentences. Well, it's a standard for digitizing reporting in all of its forms everywhere in the world. It provides consistent, comparable, machine and human readable definitions as well as data. And it's shifting reporting from paper to data. If I'm allowed one or two more sentences, XBRL
Sure.
provides a way for organizations to deliver their business reports in a digital way, complete with authoritative definitions, the relationships that exist between those definitions, machine-readable dates, currencies, identifiers, and with blocks of text categorized into, hopefully, logical and comparable sections. And all of those things make this information AI ready. Although it's a global standard for digitization, it facilitates reporting within discrete domains. So the reality is that JGAP in Japan is different to UK GAAP, and we need to be aware of that. But in the future, we really need to make it faster and easier to compare across those frameworks. So in a nutshell, that's what XBRL is about.
All right. Thank you very much. So, what XBRL has been around for 20 plus years already, right? And you said it basically makes this information that is being reported AI ready. So it has kind of been waiting for the arrival of AI that we have now. Phil, from your work implementing tools like this across HG and other companies, what makes financial data particularly challenging for AI?
So the first thing that teams overlook is, look, LLMs are not large mathematic models. They're not LMMs. They're surprisingly poor at really simple calculations. So even with perfectly clean data, you need to give AI systems a calculator, and you also need to know when to use machine learning versus LLMs. So look, choosing the right tool for each part of the workflow matters enormously. But the bigger challenge is this, financial workflows need deterministic answers, and that doesn't align to AI's probabilistic world. If you think about a simple question, what is our turnover for this financial year? With traditional tools, a human navigates that hierarchy, they know the period, they filter the context, and they get that answer. When you ask that question to an LLM, you may get 5 different answers. They may all be correct, but they come with varying narratives. And in regulated finance, that's a problem. I think that brings us to the killer, right? Which is lack of context. Clean numbers alone don't tell the story. They lack the context that human analyst held. So I would know whether or not my financial year ran from a period to a period. So for data to be truly AI ready, you need a well-defined semantic layer, something that explains what that data is. So you then have to scale that up. When you scale that up, you've got regulations and standards, and each company has their own taxonomies, their own regulatory frameworks, 10,000 concepts, I think, in US GAAP alone. The LLMs are great at extracting the facts, but they struggle dramatically to link those to the correct concept within those taxonomies. And then finally, there's the context window problem. So I like to think of this like the size of my desk. If I've got a financial report, I can put 50 pages onto my desk. You ask me about something on page 51, I have to clear that and I lose context. Also, the piece in the middle, when you have big context going into an LLM, it normally loses a little bit of the nuance in the middle of the paperwork. It's hidden under the stack. So look, I think to bring it all together, financial data is challenging for AI because you need the right data with the right context and all within those context window constraints. And I think that's the challenge.
Okay, so for me, who's also been working in XBRL for the past 13 years, that sounds a lot like the problem that XBRL was designed to solve. But maybe, John, can you help us understand if XBRL provides clean, structured data in this format? Is that automatically AI ready, or what else has to be done there?
Well, we need to make sure the AI is looking in the right place. There's this age-old idea of garbage in, garbage out, and it applies to AIs in spades. So let's pretend that a media outlet announced that, I don't know, Acme GmbH has made a 100 million euro profit. But that might be a non-GAAP measure. And the IFRS number is really, a 10 million euro loss. Well, if that's out there in the public, there's every chance that many AIs will look to that media outlet and that rather misleading answer as the gospel truth. It's exactly what Phil said. Equally, if the only source of a business report is a PDF version, then some sort of combination of humans rekeying, machine language probabilities, and LLM reasoning will create many different interpretations of that report, some of which will be a long way away from what management really means. So unfortunately, if you ask the same LLM the same question, you might well get a different answer tomorrow. They're probabilistic, not deterministic, as Phil says. And for all of those reasons, XBRL can very much help those tools as long as they're looking at that structured information. So we've got to teach them that that's the right place to look. But XBRL provides machine-readable data and definitions as prepared by a specific company. It provides a discrete and authoritative single version of the digital truth that's providing management's reporting story in a way that management has developed and is accountable for. So as long as we get the AIs to look in the right place, we go from multiple digital interpretations created by a whole host of AIs consuming information from all kinds of places to a single authoritative foundation for all of that analysis, whether it's being done by AIs or other tools. So, you still got to get it right. The company's got to get it right, but it really steps things forward in a very distinct way. I think it's really important to understand that no two reports are identically structured. Two corporate financial reports in Europe will both include data about revenue, which is defined by IFRS. But that figure won't be calculated in identical ways. Company A might have 3 divisions to consolidate. Company B might not have any. So unique corporate structures and reporting definitions and decisions made by individual companies are captured in those reports. So that gives the AI and human analysts a much more nuanced set of information to use. Finally, as Phil points out, all AIs have limited context or capacity. The 500 pages won't fit on his desk. Thanks to XBRL's ability to break up those 500 pages into very discrete sections, it's possible to require AIs to just go and look at the right pages. Now, some of that's new and experimental, but it's very clear that this mechanism opens up important new analytical capabilities.
I want to go back a little bit to what Phil said earlier. Phil, you talked about needing a semantic layer, and what John is talking about basically is XBRL is providing a machine-readable data layer and also definitions. You also talked about taxonomies, both of you. So it sounds a little bit like you're describing the same problem from different angles, maybe. Phil, when you're working with companies that don't use XBRL or similar standards, how do you create a semantic layer for financial data? How does it look like in practice?
It's a really good question, and it presents a lot of challenges. If you think about it this way, right? If you've got a database column that is the word period, and the value for that is just an integer, without context, AI might guess that it's a date like 01/01/2025, right? When in reality, the value is just 1 through 12. So without that semantic layer, AI would just send the wrong request to the database to get the information out, and you would end up with garbage queries, right? And that's where things start to get really messed up. So practically, there are a number of ways to approach it. So human actually write the semantic layer, sometimes in XML, sometimes in YAML. And they can just actually go and do it all the time. They keep it up to date. Think about that, though. Our data is changing constantly. Someone having to go in and do that doesn't play very well. So the other way that it's done is that you end up with an annotation agent. So you use an LLM to look at the data in the data warehouse. It looks at column names, data types, foreign keys, sample values, and it then writes a human-friendly description of what each column represents. And then a human has to read and validate these. So there's still human in the loop, and there's still a little bit of ambiguity there to get it right. The key insight is that AI has to understand not just the schema, but the business meaning. So that's really important. So when someone says, show me sales revenue for financial year 2024, the system looks at the semantic layer. It then generates the query to get the data because it knows which tables and columns and logic to use. and then it goes and gets it. So it's a hybrid approach without XBRL.
So, John, should XBRL maybe be repositioned as the semantic layer for financial data with AI?
Well, maybe. I mean, it's certainly designed to do exactly that, but typically it gets used providing that semantic layer, all the definitions, what does this column mean? Is this a date? Is this a Boolean? What is it? All of that is defined in the formal XBRL taxonomies, but typically today we're using it for interchange between companies, or even more commonly between a company and a market, or a company and a regulator. There's nothing to say that innovative entrepreneurs like yourself, Janis, can't go and do this inside a company. It's probably a great idea, but it's not really the way it tends to get used today.
That's true. All right, so let's get on to our second segment. Phil, you have been implementing AI solutions across multiple companies already. Can you maybe give us a concrete example of what asking your data questions in natural language actually looks like in practice? How would I do that?
Yeah, sure. If you think about how this has worked historically, look, you see finance teams would sit in front of a BI suite and they would painfully build dashboards alongside data analysts so that they could go and get the questions that they wanted answered. I think now if you asked an LLM, show me EBITDA and revenue with headcount in a dashboard, AI can now interpret that question, right? So you probably want a line chart with revenue and EBITDA. You want a bar chart showing headcount growth broken down by function, and then maybe a separate metric for revenue per head. And so AI can then go and build this complex dashboard for you just from that simple asking of that question. It understands the semantic meaning of what you've said. But then it could go deeper, right? So I've now got this dashboard and I could then click on the dashboard and I could ask AI to now give me a narrative about that specific metric. So it would pull from variance analysis, forecast to actual comparisons, and it would write an analysis that used to take hours for somebody to work through just on that small piece. So I think it does really, really well at things like that. The next use case would be very, very good at building narrative, so forecast against actual. So AI really shines when you give it your cash flow forecast and your CEO asks you, why did we miss? The actual is a mile away. And it can then write the narrative right between those two things, and it does very, very well. And the last bit that we've seen play out really well with analysis on financial data in natural language is the scenario model. So what would happen if we paid our invoices 15 days later? Or what would happen if we put our prices up 5%? And so AI can then take the data and provide some modeling analysis on top of that to be able to see what's going on. So I think with being able to speak in natural language or ask natural language questions, traditional BI tools, you had to know the question you were asking, build a dashboard to make it. Whereas now you can build the dashboards to any question you're asking on the fly, if it has that semantic layer in that context. And then the killer piece, and the piece that kind of is the cherry on top, is when you start to put this into a workflow. So what we've seen is financial analysis actually in a workflow. Picture this, Teams channel, and your CEO can say, I would like a report on EBITDA growth. Okay, so AI goes away, it builds a dashboard like we've just seen, it creates a narrative, and then it could actually ping the CFO and say, I've just created this narrative, could you validate it? And it would provide with that narrative, it would provide the reasoning, the key strengths, critical risks, the data that it used. The CEO approves it, so human in the loop, and then that would then release it to the CEO for him to see. So the difference from 5 years ago, we're going beyond traditional reporting to conversational intelligence, and the tools can now match how we think and how we communicate.
Phil, so thank you. That workflow example that you just provided sounds really, really fascinating. Like the CEO asks for a report, then the AI can go away and create it based on natural language. The CFO, as the human in the loop, can go and validate it, and then the CEO gets a notification and can look at the report. It sounds really promising. But we talked earlier about that LLMs are probabilistic, not deterministic. Sometimes you ask the same question 5 times and you get 5 different answers. John, when the CFO is validating, what are they actually checking? Like, how can, for example, XBRL help them trust what the AI generated?
Sure. So a couple of things here. The first thing is that we always say trust but verify, by which we mean, by all means, use some of those conversational analytical techniques, the kinds of fantastic new workflows that Phil just described, to use an LLM to discover new relationships, discover anomalies across data that would be really hard to do by hand. But then check that the AI answers are correct using more conventional analytic tools, deterministic rather than probabilistic. AI isn't magic. It seems weird, but the tools are designed to be imaginative. Now, in financial analysis, we're not all that keen on, too much imagination, at least in terms of the answers. So you need to have mechanisms that you walk through the answers to gain confidence. The future is becoming clearer in that context, but it's incredibly exciting, and we need to take it step by step. Now, there's one step that can really help. So this is what we term sort of trace back to truth. Data and analytics should always face up to questions of traceability. One of the nice features of inline XBRL, which is the modern digital reports being used by the US SEC, by ESMA and the FCA in Europe and the UK, the Japanese FSA, and a bunch of others, is that because they provide a single report that is both human and machine readable, then if your AI tells you that, your Acme PLC has reported a 300% increase in share buybacks, and you think that's wrong or something you really want to be sure about before you ring up the company and ask about it, you can trace straight back to the financial fact in that company's official disclosure. So it's an anchor on a web page after all. It's nothing complicated, but you can see this is what the company reported in that period and that period. Yep, that's a 300% change. That's worth a question. So it's a tremendous way to quickly give you confidence about what your tools are telling you.
Yes, so John, you mentioned trust but verify. Phil, when you implement systems like these, how do you build this trust but verify mechanism? Is the CFO actually clicking through the source data, or is it more theoretical?
It's really good, by the way, phrasing, John. I really love it. Trust but verify, right? I haven't heard it used in that way, and I think yeah, sure. That's one approach. Clicking through to the source table where you can see the components. But I mean, typically, what we look to do, you need to build AI that is explainable and traceable. And so you need to always be able to provide, when you're validating this, what was the input data that the LLM used to write this narrative or build this dashboard. So we always would pull out of those traces the input data, and that would form part of the validation step. And then also the reasoning element from the LLM. You've probably seen in Claude or ChatGPT when you ask a question and you can expand the reasoning and the thinking. That thinking and that reasoning element is also important. So I think it's multi-stage, right? You want to have the input data that the LLM was working with. You want to have the reasoning as to how it arrived at that decision, and then normally links to the actual source data so that the CFO can then validate it. So there's lots of ways that you could verify it, but yeah, trust but verify. I'm going to steal that one.
Yeah. One of those use cases would be one of those AI experiments that you mentioned, like asking questions, list the fastest growing companies in France, or analyzing going concern narratives. That's really interesting. But Phil has also been talking about individual company implementations, like entity-specific taxonomies, for example. Maybe, John, can you give us an example where this cross-company analysis could also, well, let's say, would blow a CFO's mind? How can this achieve with XBRL and AI, something that's maybe not possible today, but possible with this new AI technology?
So it's a great question. And there are huge numbers of experiments going on around the world. But fundamentally, there's a lot of information. This is a huge opportunity. There are repositories of XBRL data and metadata. That's the semantic layer that we've been discussing in the United States, in Japan, in China, in India, in Korea, many parts of Latin America, amongst others. And these things are exabytes in size. They go back the best part of a decade, and they represent incredibly rich holdings of public information that AIs can be interrogated about. Europe is working towards a new integrated approach to its digital reporting repository, a new mechanism called the European Single Access Point. And I think those kinds of repositories will continue to expand around the world. They're going to be really important because those data sources, used intelligently, offer up extraordinary opportunities for users of all kinds to ask all kinds of conversational questions of these tools. And yes, we're going to want to trace back. Yes, we're going to want to make sure that we're using the right information. But the wealth and the depth of information in these that's already there is just pretty extraordinary. We've got to start to mine it.
Yes, we definitely should. But looking at this and also talking again about this trust and verify, now we're going into the third segment of this podcast episode, and it's about challenges and governance, right? And this is wealth of information. But the question is, how do we maintain trust and also ensure explainability? Phil also mentioned already, you can look at the reasoning. You can also maybe look at the source data if you use MCPs that take data out of XBRL databases, for example. But what role should, for example, standards play in AI governance in this context?
I've already talked about this idea of tracing back to truth. That's a very useful mechanical mechanism. I think the other points are also really important. Focus on what's being used. So we really need to think about governance over data quality. Companies haven't always given their digital disclosures all the attention that they deserve. That has to change. Their digital reports will always be the first port of call for tomorrow's AI-grounded analytics. So all of the details matter. That means we probably need to crack the independent assurance problem and indeed use AI to co-pilot tools for the preparation and review of really high-quality digital reports. So that is the preparation of the reports themselves. We'll be using AI increasingly to expand that. Those tools will get 80% of the work also done, but will turn back to management whenever they get stuck. And companies should be benchmarking themselves against their peers using AI-powered analytics, not just to understand their competitiveness, but to better understand what they should be doing to continuously improve their digital disclosures. AI without high-quality data isn't anything. I think we're all taking that away from this conversation, right? It's like building a city on quicksand. It's absolutely essential that companies and regulators focus on data quality. This is a question of getting the plumbing right. I guess my message about this is pretty simple. XBRL isn't some sort of grand unifying theory or an AI robot that you've seen in the sci-fi movies. It's a basic set of digital plumbing that can help ensure that data quality, data access, and data discoverability problems are solved, meaning that key performance information is always available in a standardized and machine-readable form in a way that you can trust. In the AI era, that plumbing might be invisible, but it's critically important.
Interesting. So I like the phrase that you say XBRL is basically digital plumbing, invisible infrastructure, but critical. I don't think I have heard that before. Phil, from your implementation side, what happens when companies don't have that plumbing? What are the biggest risks and failures that you've seen so far?
I think I just echo exactly what John said, right? The biggest risk is data quality. I think some CFOs might think that we'll just throw AI at all of our data and it'll figure it out. Well, in part, that's sort of true. But AI is only as strong as the data and the context for that data that it consumes. So I've seen teams spend lots of time build sophisticated AI models on top of that fundamental broken data. And that's the biggest challenge, right? So making sure that you've got that data governance in place, clear policies, regular audit, accountability mechanisms, owners, all of the things that make a good framework for robust data. I think ensure that your underlying structured data, your XBRL, your taxonomies, your semantic layer are also correct as well, because that can also lead to problems, right? So if things are tagged incorrectly in the first place, that leads it. So AI isn't that magical, it'll fix bad data. It just amplifies it at scale. So Imagine if you create a conversational analysis tool and you give it to the whole company, all of a sudden the bad answers get amplified very quickly. So look, data governance has got to be key. The data coming in is very, very important, and AI can amplify exactly the failures in your data. I think the second failure is boiling the ocean. Right? This is AI, let's do everything with it. And I think my advice would be to use small use case driven approaches. Start small, high impact, low risk. Simple applications like anomaly detection and variance and narratives between forecast and actuals, like we talked about. Get one thing done really, really well before you move on to try and do everything, because it becomes really hard to do it. I like to think of AI like a junior analyst on your team. If you give them the right training, you give them the right context about the company, you give them the numbers, the task, then what they do, somebody senior will validate it and check it. And if it's wrong, you'll talk to them, you refine the output. And that's exactly what you should start doing with AI. So you should be starting small and iterating. Don't let a junior analyst make critical business decisions unsupervised, right? It's that simple. And then the next would be the black box problem. I love the black box problem, right? It's something that I spend an awful lot of time across a whole raft of different AI projects. And it's like the big question is why? Why did AI answer this way? And if you don't know the answer why, and you can't see it, then you've got this black box you can't see it. So you need to be able to look inside that black box. You need explainable AI from day one. And that means, look, audit trails like we've talked about before. All development teams should be able to see the LLM outputs, the LLM inputs, the reasoning, the logic, the data that went in. If it's XBRL as well, what tags did it refer to? Are the tags there? You want to see everything. And you want to be able to validate it. So can a human reconstruct the AI path? And that's all part when you're building out these tools to be able to do that. So I think model explainability, traces, decision trees for ML models. But if you can't see inside the box, don't put it into production. That's key. And I think the last bit that I'd say is, look, human in the loop is not optional. And we've all used co-pilots. You notice what they're called. Co-pilots, they're not called autopilots. They're co-pilots to do it with you. They're not fully autonomous in a lot of places. And the reason for that is I think there are some workloads where AI can be totally autonomous once you've given it enough context, enough data over time. But particularly, you want to make sure that you have that human in the loop for those critical financial decisions. So make sure that that's baked in. So I guess, look, don't rush to production without that governance layer first, making sure that you've got the right data and you can see what AI is doing.
I guess follow-up question, because Phil, you said AI doesn't magically fix bad data; it just amplifies it at scale. And John mentioned earlier that companies need to give their digital disclosures more attention, also with regards to data quality. So you mentioned human in the loop, but who's in the end responsible for data quality? The CFO, the auditor, maybe the regulator who's making the rules and the taxonomies, someone else, maybe. John, you want to start? Let's have an open discussion here.
Well, I think it's a really good question. Who owns this? Everyone and nobody. That's the problem. So the CFO signs off, but sometimes doesn't spend enough time looking under the hood. In the digital reporting context, auditors check the human readable reports, but in many countries they skip the digital layer entirely. IT thinks it's a finance problem. Finance thinks that it's probably an IT problem. We kind of need a new role. Call it the Chief Data Integrity Officer or something. I don't know. You'll come up with a good name. Someone who wakes up thinking about data quality, who understands that in an AI world, bad data isn't just embarrassing, it's kind of existential. Someone who treats, as an example, every XBRL tag like it's going to be analyzed by 1,000 algorithms tomorrow. Because they will be. So, you know what? I think that's really the job of the external reporting function going forward. Controllers, their external reporting teams, and the vendors and service providers that support them, they need to combine to become this really new, powerful force for data integrity, which will require some new skills, which will require some new processes and some new thinking. independent assurance piece should become non-negotiable. We need auditors who audit data, not just documents, and who verify that when you tag something that's called revenue, it's actually revenue and not something else entirely. Because then the bottom line is that before long, in an AI age, your data quality is your reputation. And right now, I don't think that all that many companies are aware of this. So it's a really good question.
You mentioned earlier that many companies treat XBRL or digital reporting as a compliance exercise, and have been for the last 5 years, where we did not have XBRL, where we did not have AI to properly make use of all of this data. But still, all of the data is public, right? And now we can make use of all of this data. And of course, this is a function of investor relations. Basically, you don't want investors make decisions on data that is not good enough, right? Because there has not been putting enough thought into it. Phil, sorry, I interrupted you earlier. Please go ahead.
No, that's fine. Look, I have a slightly different lens, and I do enjoy the everybody and nobody. So the everybody and nobody is a big problem, right? And it gets extended if you've got AI automation engineers, or you've got AI engineers who are building this stuff, and data engineers, right? And this is where the subject, you can't expect your AI engineers, your AI automation engineers to understand your financial data. And so it's all well and good going, well, we built something and it didn't work, and it was because of. So aligning subject matter experts from the finance function into teams cross-functionally when you're building this stuff is really, really important, because you can start to build evaluation frameworks. You can build quantitative measures to be able to assess AI outputs with evals and data sets. And so the point is, it should be cross-functional. The finance function has to sit alongside other engineering teams when you're building some of this stuff out. It can't just be, oh, they got something wrong, because they don't understand that context. So I think it's really important to have that cross-functional alignment.
All right. So we haven't, it's everyone basically who's responsible. All right. Let's head into the last segment of the podcast, a quick fire section. I'll ask each one of you 3 questions, and please give a quick answer without thinking too much about it. Let's start with Phil. What is the biggest AI myth in finance that needs busting?
Just get AI to do it. I've used that before, right, in this discussion, but I'm going to use it again. AI adds a whole new layer of complexity on top of what's already a highly fragmented and complex environment of tools and data. And so getting reliable AI takes some serious time and expertise. It won't magically fix stuff. It will expose every weakness in your data governance and amplify it. So I'd say, look, just getting AI to do it, that doesn't work. It's the biggest myth.
And what is the biggest challenge you see in companies when they start their journey with AI?
So we've seen an awful lot. Look, AI does great demos. Really, really good to build a really good demo and impress people. And capability is very different from reliability. And I think what we've seen is, in some cases, you see teams that lead by, AI can do this, now let's go and use that feature. The right way to do it would be to map out a workflow. What does Sally do day to day? What are the steps? And then how could I just take a little slice of that workflow, and how I could apply AI to that to make that a little bit better? And then you take the next slice and the next slice and the next slice, and all of a sudden you've got a workflow. So I think lead with the function and the task, don't lead with the tech. Fit the tech to the task.
Yeah, sounds reasonable. Last one. Skills CFOs need to develop in the next 2 years.
It's a great one. Build AI literacy across your team. So whilst you need to build literacy, comes back to not just you, but everyone in your team run cross-functional hackathons, coming back to what's the problem that we face, then layer with that some tech and AI engineers, and get the teams innovating together. Learn basics first, play with the tools, all of your team, understand prompting, understand how to give context, and definitely get your teams to be sharing their successes with each other, because I think building that culture is really important. I think Second one would be shift positioning. Think of AI as a co-worker, not a replacement. I love this single concept of get rid of the mundane to release the joy. So bringing joy back to our jobs, right? From number crunchers to strategists, get rid of the mundane and release the joy. So I think shift that positioning and think about it. I think the third one would be learn how to evaluate AI vendors. How are they providing insights into their decision making? How are they ensuring accuracy? How are they keeping your data safe? Being able to assess vendors in this world is really hard.
Great. Thank you. Over to John. 3 questions for you. Don't think too much. What's the most exciting XBRL and AI development that you're seeing?
Well, I'm really excited about a whole range of R&D and startup efforts that are going on in this space. I think we're about to see the emergence of a whole new suite of AI-powered XBRL tools that should make preparation and analysis of these pretty important reports significantly simpler and less stressful. And at the same time, because financial and, eventually, before long really, sustainability reports, they come from the horse's mouth. They're each company's single digital version of the truth. We will see more and more types of analysis that come back to this core information. There's always this information that is coming directly from the company is always a denominator for a wide range of KPIs that might be using other information as well. So I think that process is really spinning up, and we're in for a really interesting ride in the next few months and years. It's a really exciting time.
Yeah, agreed. What would be one thing that would surprise CFOs most about where XBRL is heading?
Well, at a technical level, XBRL is evolving to really support AI in some fundamental ways. And I think that XBRL will take much more of a plumbing role inside many companies in the future. You'll rely on it more and more and hopefully be less and less aware that it exists sort of behind the walls. Technically, it'll be much more of a digital twin to your reporting needs than today. But in practical terms, I think the thing that will be really obvious is that we'll quickly see these conversational tools will come to dominate. It will be doing absolutely the kinds of things that Phil was talking about before. Your AI will give you a message about the key changes in your draft set of accounts, but it'll do more than that, because it will also automatically generate comps. It'll compare your still private internal data with externally published public data from your peers and your competitors, and it'll kind of give you the juice. What looks good and what doesn't. Supporting charts and tables and drill down and on demand and all of that good stuff. I think that we're not very far away from those kinds of capabilities. And that means that probably without you asking, it will do things like point out the different debt levels and interest costs that your competitors might be experiencing and suggest different approaches to your own financing mix. Hey, these corporate bonds have got to roll over in 9 months. Start thinking about it. So for all of those things to happen, we need the XBRL plumbing to be humming along, but we're really getting close to these kinds of capabilities. Let's not discard anything we've just spent a long time talking about. We've really got to trust but verify. But this stuff is accelerating in a way that none of us have experienced before.
Yes. Following up on that, what do you think where financial reporting will be in 5 years?
So by 2030, right? Well, look, I think there's a very good chance. I think that financial reporting won't be a set of documents. It'll be a verifiable and continuously updated data service. We'll have enhanced assurance mechanisms that I think will give us greater trust, and all of these enhanced analytics will provide us greater insights. I think we'll spend much less time reconciling numbers because we'll have done all this hard work to make sure that we can trust this stuff. But we'll always be able to, because traceability and explainability will be baked into everything that we do. But what we'll be spending time doing instead is sort of reconciling different interpretations, which, if you think about it, is a big value add. Now, I'm not totally convinced that regulators or even our own very long-held habits will be able to move us fast enough in that kind of timescale to move to, continuous external reporting in that time frame. But we will absolutely move that way internally, and any relevant external information will be consumed and contrasted on our behalf. So I think that analysis and comparison will be absolutely vital, and that's for a slightly different reason. That's because some companies will take all of Phil's excellent advice and they'll make breakthrough improvements in a wide range of existing processes. They'll slice them up, they will improve them, they'll be advantaged because they're using these technologies. And that will make them vastly more competitive. And others will fail to do so and they're going to lose out. The media seems really obsessed with the impact of AI on jobs. I'm not convinced that there's going to be nearly a substantial impact in that area as some people believe. I think people are adaptable and they move around. But I absolutely believe that there will be fundamental winners and fundamental losers in the corporate space. Creative destruction is a core part of our economy, and AI will accelerate it dramatically. And, XBRL or digital reporting, if you prefer, and tomorrow's AI-enhanced corporate reporting will just be keeping the score. It's just that those scores are super important.
Thank you very much. So we're nearing the end. Let me try to synthesize what I've heard today from the both of you. Phil, you were telling that CFOs that AI in finance is not magic. It requires rigorous data governance, workflow thinking, especially, and also human judgment and the human in the loop. And John, you're saying that XBRL provides the semantic infrastructure that makes AI reliable, but only if companies take data quality seriously. And you both seem to agree that this isn't optional, right? It's a competitive advantage that goes to companies that get this right in the next 2 or 3 years. Any final words, John?
Look, here's something that's uncomfortable but true. We really are going to witness a pretty astonishing and perhaps existential transfer of wealth from companies that treat data as paperwork to those treated as power and the sort of the core of their business advantage. From an XBRL and digital reporting perspective, which is only a tiny part of the entire corporation, right? But there are plenty of the old guard that still think this is just about compliance. The analogy is that they're perfecting buggy whips. But I don't know whether you saw the news. China just tested an electric train that travels at 450 kilometers an hour. So I think in 5 years, AI will have strip mined every insight from every piece of structured data on the planet. And companies that are still filing garbage, they're going to be invisible. I don't think that AI cares about your marble lobby. It cares about your data quality. And it's not really an evolution. It is going to be a revolution, and revolutions have winners and losers. So my advice is to stop treating your digital disclosures like homework. Start treating them like your company's voice in a conversation with every AI on the planet, because that conversation started this year, and the future belongs to all those that are digitally accurate and eloquent, and everything else will just be noise.
Yeah. Phil, anything you would like to add? Any closing remarks?
I've taken from today something that I hadn't really even thought about from John, which is using XBRL as a benchmarking mechanism with all of these reports, actually to understand the charges I'm paying for my loans, for my finance, actually understand, have I got a good deal? XBRL opens that up, especially with these huge repos of all of these documents, right? Tons of them that you can call on to go and actually find out from your peers whether you're ahead or behind. And I think that you can always compete on cost. That's the one place there, the levers you can pull normally. And so I think it's a brilliant thing to think about XBRL in that way as well. And AI allows you to go and obviously pull all of that stuff in, scrape that data, get those reports, and then try and work out where you sit. So I think I've gained quite a lot from today, and I think that's the biggest takeaway for me.
Amazing. I hope the same is true for our listeners. So thank you both for this fascinating conversation. This has been Finance in Flow. Subscribe to our podcast if you haven't yet. Until next time, get rid of the mundane and increase the joy and keep the data flowing. Thank you very much.
This episode is brought to you by LucaNet, the CFO solution platform for future-ready finance leaders. Reimagine the way your finance team works with fully integrated workflows and enterprise-grade solutions for all your jobs to be done. From planning and consolidation to reporting, LucaNet connects people, data, and plans into a single source of truth, helping you deliver insights faster and with less complexity. Trusted by leading brands like Allianz, Bayer, Volkswagen, and Trivago, LucaNet empowers finance teams around the world to scale smarter. Learn more at lucanet.com.